like to introduce Right Worshipful Brother Don McAndrews. Currently, he's the administrative assistant to the Grand Master of Virginia. So we're very excited to have him here because he's a very busy man. So I'm glad you made it. He's the past district deputy Grand Master of District 4, if I'm correct.
Yep, that's correct.
And he's the past Grand High Priest in Virginia, the past illustrious Grand Master of Cryptic Masons in D.C., and his mother lodge is Auburn Union Park 592 in Des Moines, Iowa. And you're a member of 10 Virginia lodges, which includes ours, plus Emerald Isle Lodge 19. Is that X1X? Is that 19?
Yep, correct? 19, yeah.
In Dublin, Ireland, which is pretty cool. Also a member of 7 Royal Arch chapters, including one in Ireland. So, Don, the floor is yours.
I'd like to tell you a little about my lodge in Ireland. Emerald Isle was chartered to the Connaught Rangers. The Connaught area in Ireland is the western part of Ireland. And the Connaught Rangers were a unit of the British military. And the charter was issued in Lahore, India. That's how long ago it was, because now it's Lahore, Pakistan. And the Pakistanis kicked the Masons out of the country, wouldn't even let them go into their own building and retrieve their charter. They went back to Dublin and requested a duplicate charter. And the lodge only meets twice a year, but we have members from all over the world. And it's really a neat experience to see these people from all over the world joining together at the Grand Lodge building in Dublin. So I'm hoping next spring to be able to get back over there. Ireland is their first lodge meetings in person started the end of October. And I got a summons from my lodge there. And then the Grand King, who is presiding over the Grand Chapter in Ireland, would not allow the chapters to meet in person. So they just started this month meeting in person in Ireland. So things are getting back to normal. Ireland got hit pretty hard with the COVID thing, so that's understandable. But I like to get over there once, sometimes even twice a year. So I haven't been able to go for 2 years, and it's painful. Anyway, tonight I wanted to talk about the Royal Arch and the Cryptic Council systems, because what I want you to understand is these 6 degrees in Royal Arch and Cryptic Council basically give you a lot of information about the first 3 degrees that you didn't get when you took the first 3 degrees. So there's a lot, I guess this would qualify as being esoteric, because there's a lot of information around what you received in those 3 degrees that help you understand those 3 degrees a lot better. The Anderson Constitution, which is supposedly the Grand Lodge of England, was begun in 1717. However, that Grand Lodge didn't last for very many years. There were competing Grand Lodges there in England, particularly the Grand Lodge at York. So the ancients and the moderns, they finally combined and put away their differences and became the United Grand Lodge of England. But that was many years later. The oldest Grand Lodge that's still in existence in the world is the Grand Lodge of Ireland, 1725. That has been in continuous existence since then. And they have an interesting system. Their Grand Lodge has a grand, well, what do they call it? The grand, I can't remember the name now, but basically it's like our Committee on Work. And the Grand Lodge of Instruction, that's what it's called. And the Grand Chapter has a Grand Chapter of Instruction. Their only purpose is to make sure that absolutely none of the ritual has changed since 1725. That's their whole purpose. And so that you go into Ireland and you're going to see rituals there that were done exactly the same way, exactly the same words as in 1725. So I think that's pretty amazing myself. But That's why I love the Irish Masonic organizations. The Anderson Constitution very clearly states that the system of speculative masonry consists of 3 and only 3 degrees: the entered apprentice, the fellow craft, and the master mason, including the Holy Royal Arch. Now, what does that mean? It means that originally the Royal Arch degree was conferred in the lodges, in the Blue Lodges, and it was considered to be a reward for having done your year as Worshipful Master. So once you had completed your year as Worshipful Master, you were entitled to the secrets that were not given to you in the Master Mason degree. You remember in the Master Mason degree, you were informed that due to the untimely death of Grand Master Hiram Abiff, the Master's word was lost. But guess what? It wasn't lost. And that word is restored in the Royal Arch degree. So there's the esoteric part, the hidden part that you never knew about even before. And the cryptic degrees explain how that came about, how that happened. So these are important things to know. But let me get down to some of the nitty gritty in what you weren't told. In every degree in Blue Lodge Masonry, craft masonry, you hear the recital of duties in the opening. And you hear the senior warden recite his duties as to pay the craft their wages if any be due. And again at the closing ceremony. But do you know how wages are paid? No, they didn't tell you that. Do you know when wages are paid? No, they didn't tell you that either. Do you know where wages were paid? No. And with 80,000 fellow crafts, do you know how unworthy workers were distinguished? No, we don't tell you that. What was the punishment for attempting to receive wages when none were due you? Don't tell you that either. Do you know the purpose of a craftsman's mark? In fact, do you know how many marks exist? There were numerous marks that you weren't told about. Where on a piece of work is the craftsman mark placed? What lessons are necessary to prepare you to preside over a lodge? What is the name of the grip of a past master? Don't tell you that. Where did the past master grip originate? Who assisted King Solomon when he became old and infirm? What is the secret word of a past master? What secret work went on underneath the temple while it was being built? Don't tell you that. What is a fellow craft's name who organized the conspiracy to extort the secret word? Don't tell you that either. Why did he recant and convince 11 of his companions to recant also? Was the secret word truly lost? My wife says no. No is the secret word. If not, how was it preserved? And what ceremony marked the completion and dedication of the temple? What happened to the 153,300 workers when the temple was completed? I mean, that's a lot of people. How was the temple maintained after its completion? Why were the city of Jerusalem and the temple destroyed? Who was the Jewish king when the temple was destroyed? What happened to that king? Who freed the Jews and ordered the temple to be rebuilt? What was the name of the Jewish leader who directed the rebuilding of the temple? What was discovered beneath the ruins of the temple during that rebuilding? And to whom was the secret word originally given? it's interesting that in Royal Arch degrees and the cryptic degrees, all of those questions are answered, every one of them. And that's what's amazing about those degrees. I mean, I can go into detail on some of them. Again, like Ron, I don't want to ruin the experience for people who may be simply Master Masons and have not experienced Royal Arch or the Cryptic Council. We're lucky here in Virginia that the Royal Arch degrees and the Cryptic Council degrees are conferred all together. And in other jurisdictions, that's not the case. They're two separate organizations. Here in Virginia, well, it was about 1841, I think, that the Cryptic Council closed its doors here in Virginia and petitioned the Grand Chapter to perpetuate conferring the degrees, which they agreed. And the enticement was that the Grand Cryptic Council would give the Grand Chapter all of its money and all of its paraphernalia, and order all the subordinate chapters to give all of their money and paraphernalia to the nearest geographically located chapter. And about 2016, I think it was, I got some legislation passed where we reclaimed the Grand Council here in Virginia, and now our Royal Arch dues cards show that we're a member of like Manassas Chapter 81 and Manassas Council 81. Same name, same number, different organizations, but we do all of our business in the chapter, and we maintain all the money and paraphernalia in the chapter as well. So that was a big step forward. Parts of the other parts of the country, they don't realize how all this happened. And when a cryptic Mason, well, when a Royal Arch Mason here in Virginia presents himself to a cryptic council, like in Vermont, they absolutely said no, we would not allow them to sit in council with us. So that legislation was done to hopefully avoid that kind of thing. And we're working now to try and get councils across the country to give us mutual recognition. And I'm sure that it'll take a while, but we'll get that done. Anyway, these are all the questions here. These are all answered by taking the Royal Arch and the Cryptic degrees, every one of them. The Craftsman mark is an interesting thing. In England, the Mark Master Masons are a completely separate degree, separate organization. There's a Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons, and it's at the bottom of St. James's Street. And if you're ever in London, go visit that the Lodge of Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons. On the third floor, they have a pub, which is, I love it, and it's a good pub. Got a lot of good stuff there. But that's a separate organization completely, and a lot of the appendant bodies in England meet there, such as the Knight Masons, the Knights Templar, the Cryptic Masons. They all meet there, and the only two bodies that meet in the Grand Lodge building on Great Queen Street are the Symbolic Lodge and the Royal Arch. Those are the only two that meet there. All the other bodies meet down at the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Mason. So it's really a neat building. It's literally a stone's throw from St. James's Palace. You could hit it with a rock from their front porch. And it's just a neat place to visit. So if you're in London, I highly recommend it. And you'd be quite welcome with open arms. The things we didn't tell you. The mark is probably one of the biggest omissions. The mark was really an important piece on a piece of work, because you remember, because the temple at Jerusalem was holy ground, they were not allowed the use of any axe, hammer, or any tool of iron. That had to all be done at the quarry. And so actually what they did is they set up a template of diamond-shaped stones that were the perfect size of the foundation of King Solomon's temple. And every course of the building was set out on this template, and the stones were very carefully paired, marked. And the marks were very important because once the stones were sent to the temple site, they had to reassemble them on the foundation in exactly the same order. So they had a whole marking system that basically, if you were stone number 2, they'd start in the northeast corner, by the way. If you were stone number 2, then you would mark one side of stone number 1 with 2, and one side of stone number 3 with 2. And you would have 1 and 3 marked on the stone in the corner there. So it was a way that they could tell how to put these back together. And the most important mark on a stone was called the bed mark. If a stone was raised from the quarry and the grain went this way, if you laid it on its side, it would splay. Its strength was the way it grew in the quarry. So if you laid it on its side, it would splay. You needed to mark the bed, the bottom of the stone. So the bed mark was probably the most important mark that was on there. And then they had a mark for the quarry whence it was raised. They had a mark for the building site where it was going to. And they had the maker's mark on there. Nothing to do with the alcohol, but the maker's mark had to be put on there because if the stone was defective, you had to find out who did it and correct that defect. And that was a very important mark. So you had a plethora of marks put on the stone. And what face of the stone do you think it was put on? It'd be either the top or the bottom because it would be covered. You wouldn't see it after the stone was incorporated into the building. So although it's interesting that some marks were put on the sides of the stones, and to this day, if you go into England and visit some of the big cathedrals there, and take your binoculars if you do this, because you can see some marks where the stones are high enough that you wouldn't notice them unless you had binoculars, and it's pretty cool to see some of those. They put out a book, the Grand Lodge of Mark Master Masons, called Marking Well, and it really is an interesting book because they go into a lot of photography of some of these cathedrals and some of the marks that are on the stone. But this isn't taught in our Royal Arch even. So, and that's a shame. I think it's a shame. We ought to know more about that. In the Royal Arch degree, the candidate is caused to meet 3 overseers. And this is accurate tradition that 3 overseers had to approve a piece of work. You couldn't just depend on one because bad work could get through one possibly. But 3 overseers assured that you were going to have good work. Well, what was the overseer's mark? That was a good question. The overseer's mark, each overseer, if he approved of the piece of work, he would make 1 strike with his chisel. And when you had 3 overseers making 1 strike, you end up with a triangle. But it's not just any triangle. They all have chisels that are the same size. It's an equilateral triangle, which is also called a perfect triangle. So the sign of perfection that is ready to go to the temple site was a perfect or equilateral triangle. Again, we don't teach this anywhere, and that's a shame. It gives you an understanding of a lot of the symbology that goes along with the degree. Let me see here. The in the master. Shoot, trying to remember which degree it's in. There's a grip that's introduced. It's got to be in the mark. Yeah, it is in the mark. There's a grip that's introduced that is called the Lewis, but we don't teach the fact that the name of the grip is the Lewis. It's an interesting grip of interlocking hands that is meant for assisting craftsmen coming up the steep at Joppa. And it's a lifting grip. Well, it's interesting. The name is Lewis, and Lewis was a tool used to raise very large running stones to the level where they had to be used. And there's a Lewis jewel that you'll see many Masons wear, and the symbol on the jewel is the Lewis, the tool, and that's a lifting tool. So it's appropriate that if you have Master Masons in multiple generations in your family, it's a lifting tool, it's a raising tool. So that's not taught, and that's a shame, I think. So a lot of good stuff there. Now the council degrees. Actually, when I took the council degrees many years ago, I was not that impressed at the time. But we can't do without the council degrees. The council degrees provide very important information. We're told in the second section of the Master Mason degree that due to the untimely death of Grand Master Hiram Aviv, the Master's word is lost. And yet it wasn't lost, it was preserved. And that's the council degrees. The council degrees explain how, where, and when that was all done. The council degrees give you that right of preservation. And that's what it's all about. And of course, in the Royal Arch degree, you eventually discover that which was preserved, and the Master's word is restored.